Hello and welcome to the channel. Back in January, so about a month or so ago, the people at Dehancer asked if I would be interested in reviewing their plugin for Lightroom. It's a little bit of research, looked to see, what people were saying about it, and it looked like it had a lot of really good reviews, so I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and take a look at it. In exchange for the review, Dehancer said they would give me a copy of the software, and I was free to do whatever kind of review I wanted, good, bad, indifferent. My usual process for dealing with film images is I will shoot film, usually with my FM2, and take that, get it developed, and get scans of all of the photos and bring those into Lightroom and edit them at that point. And so really for emulation software for film, really probably should follow the same thing. But I'm going to actually do it both ways. So I will first go and follow their process, bring it in, just do what they recommend, adjust the aspect ratio, straighten it out, and go run it through Dehancer, make whatever changes I need there, bring it back into Lightroom, and then finish editing. And then I'll do a second one where I will first go and do all of my adjustments in Lightroom and then go and bring that into Dehancer and just look at the difference. So this first photo, this was taken a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago actually, and you can tell we're not in Minnesota anymore. So this was taken down in Belize, and it was out on Keycocker, which is one of the islands there. Thought this would make kind of an interesting photo, and so I grabbed a shot of this. He's got his breadfruit. He's got a bag of, I think that's actually bait. I think that's what he was actually using later when I saw him fishing. But I thought it was just kind of an interesting photo, and I thought one that would really look well with a film look to it. One of the things that Dehancer recommends in their documentation is to set the profile to Adobe standard. So I'm going to change it from Camera Natural to Adobe Standard. And the next thing they tell you is to reduce the exposure by 1 stop. And so we'll go ahead and do that. Now that does make for a rather dark photo. They also want you to reduce the contrast by -40. And then bring the blacks up to 60. The other things that they ask are to really turn off all sharpening and any sort of noise reduction. I'm going to leave the color noise reduction where it is, but the luminance was already at 0. Sharpening I set down to 0. And I'm not quite sure why those two, but we'll go with that for now. There's a couple of other things that they ask when you do the edit in terms of the settings of the TIFF file that will get generated, that gets brought into Dehancer, which is to make sure the color space is set properly and that the bit depth is set properly. I am going to do one thing before we start, and that is I'm going to crop it to a 2:3. This was taken with a Micro Four Thirds camera, and so I want the aspect ratio to be what it would be with film. And I think to me that horizon looks like it's maybe just a little, just slightly, very slightly off. So I'm just going to tweak that ever so slightly. And this is going to be the photo that I work with. Now, with the default sharpening turned off, if I zoom in, his face does look a little soft. So I'm kind of questioning that initially, but we'll kind of see where it goes. The next step is to go to Edit In and select Dehancer. Now it's going to give you this dialog box, copy with Lightroom adjustments, and then if I come down to here, I'm going to see a TIFF sRGB, which is what they want, and 16 bits per component. I'm going to leave the resolution and compression the same. We can see already that we ended up with a much warmer image. And we could look at some of the other emulations. They also have Kodachrome, but notice Kodachrome is experimental, but it does give that look. Notice how much brighter those colors are, and this does remind me of what I used to see when I did shoot Kodachrome back in the 1980s, 1990s timeframe, so quite a long time ago. But I do rather like that. But we'll go with Kodak Gold 200, and we'll now look at what we can do with that. So I think, if I was just shooting this with film, is this what I would have gotten from my camera, from my FM2? Not really quite sure, but it sure does seem to have that feel to it. I can see the graininess out there. The colors are a little bit muted, and it just does, to me anyway, have that film look to it. And so it does look like something that maybe, somebody would have taken 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, minus obviously that solar array. And, we can play with that. Maybe I don't want it quite that warm. So you can see, you can adjust the temperature. And so that's kind of interesting in and of itself. That's obviously something you couldn't do with film, but I'm just going for a certain look. So I'm going to just bring that temperature compensation probably to somewhere about here. I think that looks a little bit better. It looked a little bit too warm for me before. I'm not going to worry about defringing. I don't really see any of that. I don't really have any high contrast areas in this. And in terms of exposure compensation, you can brighten or darken it. I think for me, I want to see some detail in his face, but I don't want it to be too bright. So I'm thinking maybe somewhere right in this range would be about right. Now you can, and I remember actually working with a couple of developer places in the past. There used to be a really good one over in St. Paul. I don't even remember the name of it, but I remember going over there and getting the photos back and saying, I'd like to, maybe boost the contrast a little bit, or, play with the colors. And so this film developer area allows you to do that. And so you can play with things like color separation, and it doesn't do a whole lot, but, you can also play with the gamma. You can boost the contrast. And I think actually I want to drop it a little bit in this case. And the next thing is film compression. And this is where you could play a little bit with something that they call the impact. And you can see it's really more playing with the contrast again. But if you watch that histogram on the bottom, you can see it is actually compressing the histogram as I move it to the right, and expanding it as I move it to the left. And so I think I'm going to probably end up about here. The white point I think is pretty good, but I could adjust the white point if I wanted to. Perhaps you could say maybe this boat should be a bit whiter. Maybe I want to play with that a little bit, but I don't know. I don't really like this. I'm just going to put it right back at the default. The tonal range I think is good. Color density I think is good too, although I could play with that a little bit. It just depends on how much you want to have those reds pop. And at this point I start to think about, am I moving away from what I really wanted to accomplish with emulating Kodak Gold 200, and really trying to go back to some of that look that I had with Kodachrome. The thing that's really interesting though is I'm going to go past expand. So expand basically allows you to expand the dynamic range of the photo, setting the white point, setting the black point. Certainly something I do with every digital photo that I edit, but not something that I think makes a whole lot of sense when you're talking about a film image. So I'm going to skip that for a minute, but I'm going to go to this print. And so what print does, and you'll notice as soon as I hit it, it got brighter. So print actually allows you to select the type of paper that you are going to use. And they don't give you a ton of options here. And this is something where I wish this was a bigger list, because back when I was shooting film, a lot of times I would pick the type of paper and finish based upon the types of photos. And it was rare that I picked glossy paper. A lot of times I went for more of a satin finish. And so I wish that there were more options here. So that's something that hopefully in the future there will be additional options. But for now, there really is just one that you really have a choice of if you're looking at doing a film emulation for still photography. Now they do have some others that are more video related, but we're going to stick with this one for now. So once you do that, you can then go and adjust the exposure. You can make it a little bit brighter, darker. I think I'm going to go just a little bit brighter on this. The tonal contrast, and I think I'm going to actually bring that down a little bit. Color density. So you're really kind of playing with the saturation, and then saturation, just want to really kind of bring out, just really looking at that shirt. And it's kind of that, I think it was Life magazine, maybe it was Look, one of them, they used to tell their photographers always try to get some red in the photo, and definitely it works pretty well. Color head, these are more adjustments that would be made by a lab if you were asking them to do that. Not going to really change anything there, but what I am going to do is look at the grain. And so turning on the grain, and you can see the grain showed up, and so that's something pretty common with film. But what I like about this is I can actually adjust where the grain shows up, and so I can increase it in the midtones. Highlights is where it really shows up a lot, and so I think I really want to reduce it in the highlights, and I can also control the amount of it as well, and I don't know why somebody would want that. I'm going to actually make it pretty minimal, so somewhere like around 4. And you can also increase or decrease the size of it. I'm going to just keep it down at 1, because that does look to me a little bit more like what I would have. Halation, this typically shows up in the areas of high contrast. And so basically what this was is you'd get a little bit of bleed, is probably about the best way to put it, in high contrast areas between the darker and lighter subjects. I don't really have much of that here, so I don't think it's really going to show up in this photo. But basically, if you turn it on, you'll see a little bit of a glow along the edges in those high contrast areas. Not something that I'm overly excited about, so I think I will leave that part off. And then bloom, that's another one that really doesn't have much of an effect for this photo. It does have a little bit, so if you notice, it did change a little bit what was going down here, but where you'll see this really come into play is with night photos, especially if you have neon. This is, again, it's another color bleed sort of thing, although this is more internal to the color, whereas halation is external to the color, and so allows you to kind of play around with that. I do kind of like how that did bring it up a little bit though, so I think I'm going to leave that where it is. You can see highlights, it's not really doing much, and you really wouldn't expect it to. So I think it was really impact probably was affecting it. Yep. And it looks like the impact is really the slider that's having the most to do with it. So film damage, Never was a huge fan of that. I've seen it in some other software applications. I suppose if you're looking for a certain artistic effect, that would make sense, but I'm not going to do that. And then vignetting, we can go and, whether you want to have kind of that faded outlook towards the edge or come in with a deep vignette. You can adjust the feather so you could see, exactly where it is. Just to bring that down for a second. You can also play with the aspect ratio and make it more oval, circular, or more of a vertical oval. I think for this one, maybe having something like that. Play with the size. And let's bring that feather back to where we wanted it, around 65, somewhere in there. And I'm almost thinking for this one, maybe have a little bit of that light fall off towards the corners. So I think that's about where I'm going to stay with this. Now if I hit OK, it'll come back into Lightroom. And so we can compare this now to the original. And so let's look at our reference and our original. We could see what we did. And so one of the things that we can see right off the bat is that the colors are much different. It's no longer an overly cool image. It was an overcast day when I shot it, and the white balance was set to daylight, and so we got that blue cast to it, so it had that cool look to it. But definitely looking at the two, I do rather like the way that came out, and it does, to me anyway, look like a film photo. Now, is this what I would have gotten with the Kodak Color 200? I don't really know. But it also doesn't really matter, right? Because it gave me the look that I wanted, and that's the important thing. I am thinking that maybe in a future video, I will actually go and shoot both a digital image and a film image using a specific film, and then just see what happens when I compare those two. One, the actual film image along with the digital image using Dehancer. So kind of stay tuned for that. That'll probably be a month or two down the road when I do that. But I think that could be kind of interesting just to see, how close is it, really, and how close can you get it? Now, I did mention at the beginning of this video that I would not stop at this point, because what I would do typically in the past would be then once I got the photos back from the, wherever I had the film developed, I would then take the digital version that they gave me, and I would then bring that into Lightroom and make my adjustments. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So we're going to come back here, and we're going to first go, and I can see that I've got room on both ends. And that makes sense because digital does have more range, more dynamic range than film does. And so if I go and set my black points, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and double click on blacks and whites, and that is going to expand the tonal range of the image. I'm then going to bring the highlights down a bit, and sometimes it's more than just a bit, but I think somewhere probably in this range, and I think just boost the shadows just a little bit, which means I'm going to probably have to add a little bit of contrast to it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to leave the vibrance and saturation, although maybe with that shirt, so that it's really the shirt to me that's kind of making the photo. So I'm just going to come in here, and I think maybe it's give it some slight saturation, but I think I also want to just make it just a touch brighter. Not super bright, but just a touch brighter. So maybe something in this range just to kind of bring attention to him. So probably something around there. You can see just brightened it up slightly. Not really going to change here. I am going to go and sharpen it because I did lose a lot of sharpening by bringing that down. The default was, but I typically use 50. Deals with that as well. Going to bring that down to 0.9. And let's just see what we can do in terms of detail. Detail looks good. And then masking, bring that in. And so now if I look at the before and after, you can see a little bit brighter. That shirt pops a little bit more. And I have, I think, really an image that I'm pretty happy with. So let's go back and now take the approach of using this or using the image as it first came into Lightroom. So having the profile set for what the camera was, also making some adjustments there, basically getting the image to where I want it, and also to show you that it actually was a sharp image before I started. So let's come back to here. So at this point, what I want to do is now I want to go back and instead start with the settings as they came in, make some adjustments first in Lightroom, and then bring it over to Dehancer and see what the difference is. So I'm going to just go hit reset. Now I'm back to camera natural, and you can see all the settings here. You can see my sharpening is back. And you can also see that, yes, it was in fact a sharp photo when I started, contrary to what it looked like in the last one. But you know, that is kind of with the film look, you do get that little bit of softness. So one of the things people talk about with digital is sometimes it's a little bit too clear. So first thing I'm going to do, go back, just reset that aspect ratio to 2:3. Bring that down, just do that little bit of straightening again, just to get that nice and straight. And I think that's good. Now I'm going to go and just set my black point and white point, and probably bring the shadows up a little bit. Bring the highlights down. Just play a little bit with those two sliders to kind of get that where I want. Kind of like what that's doing to the shirt. I think maybe add a little bit of texture just because I like kind of the details in his face. I don't think I'll do any localized masks on this. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe do a little bit of dehaze. I think those are good. Those are good. So really then it just comes down to sharpening. I personally like to have my sharpening set at 50 and the radius at 0.9, so just a little bit less than 1 pixel. And let's just go ahead and just see what that looks like in terms of detail. Can bring that up a little bit. And then with the masking, I don't really need to have any sharpening in the sky. And I'll leave the noise reduction where it is at 0. And now let's bring this into Dehancer and see what happens. So go here. Just want to make sure that's all the same. And go ahead and hit edit. So now that I'm in Dehancer, and we can see big difference with what came in, right? So a lot brighter. I think I want to turn off a lot of this stuff first. That does remember what you did the last time. So let's first get rid of all of that, turn all of these off. And I guess you could say, you know, there's advantages or disadvantages, but this definitely shows you why they recommend, you know, making the changes that you do. And so bring the exposure compensation down, and temperature probably in here somewhere. And I think I definitely want to reduce some of the contrast. So you can see already that there is a big difference, and why it is kind of important to read the manual and follow what it is that they say when you're doing that. So color separation, going to bring that up a little bit. I can get a workable image from this, but you can see it does take a lot of work, and it definitely does not look quite the way that I like. So, and you can see this histogram looks way different than what we had before, and you can see there is a lot that appears to be clipped over here, but I think, let's go ahead and hit OK. And so now if I look at this versus what I created before, quite a big difference actually in the looks between them. I do actually like the one that I did when I followed their lead, as opposed to the one that we had before. If I zoom in, the reds are a little bit better. So that is my experience so far with Dehancer. I do plan on doing some more experiments with it. I'm really interested to look at the black and white processing. That's something today I do a lot with Nik Silver Effects Pro. So just kind of curious to see what kind of results I can get, compare those two with each other. So that'll be another video in the future. But overall, I would say that I really did like the results that I got from Dehancer. Now, is it exactly what I would have gotten had I shot film and then made the adjustments? I don't know, but as I mentioned earlier, it's not really important that it is or isn't. It's really more the look that I came out with, and does it fit, my needs and what I wanted, to get from it. So I think I did, and I think definitely shows, even though maybe when you first look at what they recommend, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but obviously it does make a big difference with the final result. And I suspect that there may be people that tried Dehancer and did not get the kind of results that they were looking for. And it may be because they did too much ahead of time in Lightroom and didn't really follow that. So for me, following their process did seem to make a lot of sense and did give a much better result. So as always, thanks for watching. If you like this video, and this is probably the longest video I think that I've put out so far. So if you've made it to this point, thank you. But if you did like it, please give it a like. And if you'd like to see more videos in the future, know when I post some things out there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell, and you'll be notified when something new gets posted. Thanks. Bye.